There is a quiet certainty most people carry without ever questioning it. The feeling that there is a solid me inside, a stable center that stays the same from day to day, year to year, even as life changes around it. And this certainty feels so natural, so obvious, that it rarely invites inspection, because from the inside, identity does not feel like something that moves or shifts. It feels like something that simply is. Like a core you inhabit rather than a process that unfolds, and yet this feeling of solidity is not evidence of permanence, it is evidence of continuity, and those two things are not the same. The brain is deeply invested in continuity, not because it is philosophically comforting, but because it is biologically useful, because a creature that experiences itself as fragmented, discontinuous, or constantly resetting would struggle to plan, to learn, to form relationships, to survive, and so the brain does something remarkable and subtle. It creates a narrative of you, a story that links yesterday to today to tomorrow, smoothing over gaps, contradictions, and changes so effectively that the story feels like an object rather than an ongoing construction. From the inside, this narrative does not feel like a story being told. It feels like a stable identity being expressed, and that is precisely the illusion. Because stories are dynamic, flexible, editable, while objects are fixed, and the brain benefits from making a flexible process feel like a fixed thing, because fixed things feel reliable, predictable, safe. This is why identity feels solid even when almost everything about you is constantly changing. Your mood changes across the day. Your energy changes with sleep, your reactions change with context, your beliefs shift subtly with experience, your memories update every time you recall them, and yet, despite all this motion, you wake up each morning feeling like the same person. Not because nothing changed, but because the changes were woven seamlessly into the ongoing story, not highlighted as disruptions, and the brain is very good at hiding change from the one experiencing it. This hiding is not deception, it is design. The brain does not announce updates to identity the way software announces a new version. It applies patches quietly in the background, preserving the sense that this is still me, because the feeling of being the same person is what allows you to act without constantly re-evaluating who you are, what you want, and how you fit into the world. And if that feeling were lost, even temporarily, the result would not be enlightenment, but confusion. Identity then is less like a statue and more like a river with a name, always moving, never identical from moment to moment, yet recognizable because the flow is continuous, because yesterday's water leads into today's, and because the banks guide the movement in familiar ways. But from inside the river, it does not feel like movement, it feels like stillness. And this is one of the most important insights. Change does not feel like change while it is happening gradually. It only feels like change when it is sudden, disruptive, or contrasted sharply against expectation. And because most identity change is slow, adaptive, and context-sensitive, it is experienced not as transformation, but as this is just how I am now, without any clear sense of when or how the shift occurred. This is why people often say, "I've always been this way," even when evidence suggests otherwise, because the brain retroactively aligns the story of the past with the present version of the self, smoothing inconsistencies, reframing memories, and quietly editing the narrative so that the current identity appears inevitable, stable, and continuous. The feeling of solidity, then, does not come from identity being fixed, it comes from identity being well maintained. Habits play a major role in this maintenance. When you act in similar ways across similar situations, your brain infers a stable trait. I am like this. I don't do that. This is who I am. And each repetition reinforces the sense of a consistent self, even though habits themselves are learned, adjustable, and sensitive to environment. But because habits operate automatically without constant conscious deliberation, they give the impression of an underlying essence, something innate rather than something practiced. Memory deepens this illusion even further. You do not remember your past as a raw recording. You remember it as a story centered on a protagonist, you, with motivations, traits, and continuity. And every time you recall a memory, you are not retrieving it intact, you are reconstructing it using your current perspective, current beliefs, and current emotional state, subtly updating the past to align with the present. Which means that your sense of having always been this way is partly the result of memory quietly reshaping itself to match who you are now. The brain prefers coherence over accuracy. If a memory conflicts with your current self-image, it is often softened, reframed, or gradually forgotten, not out of dishonesty, but out of a need to preserve narrative stability, because a self that feels internally contradictory is harder to navigate, harder to trust, harder to inhabit. This is why identity feels like a solid object, even though it is built from fluid processes, because the brain continuously synchronizes memory, habit, emotion, and expectation into a single, ongoing narrative, and presents that narrative to consciousness as a unified me. But here is the crucial grounding point. The fact that identity is constructed does not make it fake. A story can be real without being fixed. A process can be real without being frozen. A pattern can persist without being static. The illusion is not that you exist. The illusion is that you exist as a single, unchanging thing, and this illusion is not a mistake. It is a functional interface, a way for a complex, changing system to feel livable from the inside. When neuroscientists look for the self in the brain, they do not find a single center, a command room labeled you, because identity is not located in one place. It is distributed across systems that handle memory, emotion, attention, body awareness, social context, and decision-making, and these systems do not always agree, which is why you can feel conflicted, divided, uncertain, or inconsistent without feeling like you have ceased to exist. The brain resolves these disagreements not by eliminating them, but by narrating over them, by maintaining the sense that despite internal variation, there is still one experiencer, one ongoing perspective, one continuous thread. That thread is what you feel as me. And because that thread rarely breaks, because it is maintained even through sleep, distraction, and emotional shifts, it feels solid, dependable, permanent, even though it is constantly being rewoven. This is also why change can feel threatening, not because change erases you, but because it challenges the narrative the brain has been maintaining, and narratives resist revision, especially when they have been reinforced for a long time. But resistance does not mean impossibility, and it certainly does not mean disappearance. You do not vanish when your identity shifts. You do not lose existence when a belief softens, a value evolves, or a role fades. What changes is the story, not the experiencer. And this distinction matters deeply because much unnecessary fear comes from confusing identity with existence, from believing that if the self is not fixed, then it must be fragile or unreal, when in fact flexibility is what allows the self to persist across time, across change. A rigid identity would shatter under pressure. A flexible one adapts. The reason identity feels solid is because the brain works tirelessly to make it feel that way, to give you a sense of being someone rather than a swarm of shifting processes. And this is not something to dismantle aggressively or reject. It is something to understand gently, because understanding does not remove the experience of self, it simply loosens the fear around change. As we move forward in this video, we will explore how this sense of self is distributed in the brain, how memory continually rewrites the story of who you are, and how identity can change without you ever feeling like you disappeared. But for now, the foundation is this. You feel like a fixed identity, not because you are static, but because your brain is excellent at maintaining continuity. And continuity, when done well, feels like permanence.